Hey guys, and today I'm going to be making a video explaining about the Austro-Hungarian Empire. So let's get right into it. So basically guys, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was a massive country located in Central and Eastern Europe and also partially in the Balkans. It was formed in 1867 as a result of a compromise between the Austrians and the Hungarians, in which the Hungarians basically wanted a lot more autonomy and basically wanted, more. They basically wanted more power in the empire, and they wanted more recognition. And it was dissolved in 1918 at the end of as a result of their defeat in the First World War. As you can see, guys, it was dissolved on the 31st of October 1918, and its government. It was actually the only dual monarchy in the world. So basically, a dual monarchy is where two monarchs rule either side of an empire. So that's basically how the Austro-Hungarian Empire operated. It operated between two kings. Well, the main one was. The main governor was Emperor Franz Joseph, and he was known as the Emperor of Austria and the King of Hungary. And so basically, in that compromise, as I mentioned earlier, the Hungarians didn't want outright independence. They only wanted more autonomy, and they would still accept the Austrian emperor as their own. And so they technically still wanted to remain in the empire, so that whole revolution wasn't all about outright independence. So basically, the Austro-Hungarian Empire in World War One. It didn't really do too good. It performed quite badly in the First World War, but it did see some progress with the Italians, who coincidentally also didn't do very well. And the Austro-Hungarian Empire actually won a few major battles, but these were won with the support of Germany, mainly the Germans, because the Germans would always have to aid the Austrians, because they were constantly being pushed back on every front that they were fighting on. Well, except maybe the Italian front, but they were even being pushed back by the Serbians, who actually fared pretty well, but they failed eventually when the Austrians and the Bulgarians invaded them from the north and the eastern side. And eventually they did have to surrender along with Germany and the rest of the Central Powers, and as a result of their defeat, they were essentially carved up into various different nations along ethnic lines. Since there was a ton of national, there was literally like a rise, and like a rise of nationalism, like an intense rise of nationalism in the empire, and most, if not all, of the ethnic groups living within the empire wanted either autonomy or wanted either more autonomy or downright independence. And that's one of the main reasons why the Austro-Hungarian Empire failed. It was too diverse. And the Austrians constantly tried to keep themselves at... they kind of tried to keep themselves above all the rest. They were... the ethnic groups living within the empire were given a lot more autonomy, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire actually became one of the most tolerant nations in the world, in fact. But I think the Austrians did try to keep a lot of political power for themselves a bit, like a bit. And after the First World War, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was carved up into different nations, and these nations were Austria, Czechoslovakia, the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats and Slovenes, which would eventually become Yugoslavia, Hungary, and Transylvania was given to Romania, since the Romanians had contributed alongside the Allies during the late parts of the war, and the lower parts of Poland and the lower part of Poland was given to Poland as it was recreated after the war, and Lviv, which is that southern area of Ukraine that was under the Austro-Hungarian control, was given to the Soviet Union. And let's look at some additional facts. Austria-Hungary was actually the first nation to declare war in 1914. Oh yeah, because after the assassination of the Archduke Franz Ferdinand, they actually issued a huge a list of a list of 10 demands to the Serbians, and the Serbians actually agreed to 9 out of 10 of these demands. They only disagreed to the 10th demand, which in which that demand was basically, in which if they had accepted that demand would have allowed Austrian officials to, or like the Austrian police force to operate in Serbia, and essentially for Serbia to become a part of the empire, which they obviously were going to refuse. And so as a result of that, the Austrians used that as an opportunity to declare war, because the Austrians actually wanted to provoke a war with Serbia. It did own a very sizable part of Europe. Like, it owned much of Central and Eastern Europe, and quite a sizable part of the Balkans as well. Europe's largest entity. Yeah, it was one of the biggest, was one of the largest empires in Europe at that time, in terms of landmass. And it was also, and its economy was actually one of the fastest growing in Europe, since they were implementing industrialization and more reforms to basically get their economy more up to scratch with the rest of Europe, because compared to the rest of Europe, they were actually quite underdeveloped. Since the Hungarians didn't really want to industrialize, so basically in that compromise that actually formed the Austro-Hungarian Empire, it actually allowed the Hungarians to kind of go their own separate way from the Austrians, but the Austrians were still in charge of military matters and foreign affairs. But the Hungarians were allowed to choose their own kind of path, in which they chose not to industrialize, while the Austrians chose to go in that direction. And the major ethnic groups that made up the Austro-Hungarian Empire were the Austro-Hungarian Empire consisted of a lot of ethnic groups, and these ethnic groups were Germans, Hungarians, Polish, Czechs, Hungarians, Slovaks, Slovenes, Croatians, Serbs, Italians, and Romanians, in which the Hungarians were actually the largest ethnic group in the empire. And so they were so basically they were given a little bit, the Hungarians were given a little bit more rights than all the other ethnic minorities. But after that compromise, the Austro-Hungarian Empire did, the Austrians did decide to give the other ethnic groups more rights, such as the right to get an education in their own language, have street names in their own language, and basically, and they were allowed to sing the national anthem in their own language. Basically, it gave them more. They basically gave them more linguistical rights, and actually more. More rights in general, actually, but it was mostly linguistical. It was, or a dual monarchy. Yeah, it was the only empire in the world to actually have operated under a dual monarchy. So basically, the empire's political organisation was complex and unusual because of its origins as two separate kingdoms. It was also known as the dual monarchy. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was also the crowned king of both Austria and Hungary. Oh yeah. Overseen by Franz Joseph. Yeah, so basically, he was the longest reigning monarch in Austrian history. In fact, Franz Ferdinand was actually the only heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne since his two brothers. They probably weren't his brothers. I meant the two other heirs all died, and so he was the only remaining successor. And this was its flag, as you can see. Basically, both sides, but the left side of the flag represents the Austrians, and the right side of the flag represents the Hungarians. And there's a map of the empire. As you can see, it was extremely large. Although it did not have a colonial empire, since it lacked the navy to defend one. And it also lacked the military power to maintain one. It was known by many names. Wow. In 1908, Austria-Hungary annexed Bosnia and Herzegovina, and that actually caused tensions between them and the Russians, because basically the Russians wanted to protect the Slavic and Orthodox population of the Balkans, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire was basically wanting to expand more into that area. And that caused tensions between the two nations. Oh, and here's an ethnic map of the empire. As you can see, the Hungarians made up the largest part. They made up the largest. They made up the largest part of the empire, and they had They also had a small minority of Italians actually in the empire. And they had Polish and Ukrainians and Czechs and Slovaks, Croats and Slovenes and Bosnians, which it was an incredibly diverse place. The dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Fed up with the feudal system and the generational indentured servitude that plagued working class families, civil unrest was on the rise. Great famines and food shortages rampaged through several countries in the Austrian Empire, further adding to the civil unrest and discontent with the aristocracy. So basically, the Austrian Empire, which came before the Austro-Hungarian Empire, was still operating under a feudal system, in which it was actually very outdated It was quite outdated for the time, since the Austrian Empire was actually one of the last countries to abolish such system. And this system obviously angered the working class people, since they were basically treated as second class citizens. And they eventually rose up, and this also led to the creation of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The compromise promised a delectable solution for both Austria and Hungary, full autonomy for the Austrian Empire, and the opportunity to make its own decisions, politically and economically, would be granted to Hungary, provided they accept one small caveat. The newly formed Austro-Hungarian Empire instituted a complex dual monarchy. Both Austria and Hungary would operate under separate parliaments and prime ministers, while still being ruled by a single monarch. Kaiser Franz Joseph I became the ruling body over both Austria and Hungary. His titles included Emperor of Austria and King of Hungary. The Austro-Hungarian Empire's decline. A cascade of events led to the dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. First, the loss of public heirs to the throne weakened the monarchical power. Secondly, tensions were mounting as the annexation of Bosnia-Herzegovina took place in 1908, which caused more ethnic tensions, pretty much. And there was quite a lot of ethnic tensions within the empire, which was a main factor in its decline and eventual collapse. Historically, this hostile takeover of Ottoman Empire territory is the proverbial first shot fired in starting the conflicts that would become World War I. At this time, tensions all over Europe exploded into various conflicts and hostile takeovers of territory, economic resources and political power. The annexation also angered Serbia and Pan-Slav nationalists who strove to remove the Austro-Hungarian influence over their countries. In 1914, while in Sarajevo, the largest city in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and also the modern day capital, actually, of modern day Bosnia and Herzegovina, Archduke Franz Ferdinand was targeted by a shadow organization hell-bent on removing all political and economic ties with the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Black Hand Society was a shadow company created within the Serbian military and run by high-ranking officers in the Royal Serbian Army. And so basically that's why the Austrians thought that that's why they thought that the Serbian government themselves were actually involved in the assassination and had planned it and aided it. Failed assassination attempts rang out through Sarajevo streets as the royal motorcade procession transported the Archduke and several other high-ranking sovereigns as attempted bombing occurred while the Archduke's motorcade was en route to a town hall reception. Ferdinand's speech was interrupted by distress and the fact that he was still covered in blood from the bombing that left nearly 20 people severely wounded. Though he delivered his speech, Ferdinand and his wife were more concerned about those who were hospitalized. They left the reception and headed for the hospital. There's Gavrilo Princip, the Serbian nationalist, the Bosnian Serb nationalist who assassinated the Archduke and pretty much triggered World War One. Yeah, he was pretty much the trigger for the World War One. The coordinated attacks on the Archduke's life continued and finally proved fatal for him and his wife. The successful assassination, Gavrilo Princip managed to corner the remaining motorcade vehicles. A miscommunication between the three motorcade vehicles about the new route change caused the Archduke's car to stall in an attempt to redirect themselves. As the car stalled, Princip took advantage of the helpless sovereign officials and gunned them down at point-blank range. Once again, the Austro-Hungarian Empire found itself without a suitable heir to the throne. Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated on 28th of June 1914, and World War I began a month later, on July 28th, 1914. At this time, tensions were at an all-time high between the Austro-Hungarian Empire and Serbia, joined by their allies. War was on the horizon once again. The actual dissolution of the empire. Protests, riots, revolutions, political upheaval, the rise of nationalism and democratic freedom, unresolved territorial disputes, famine and war, my lord, are all excellent reasons to flee one's homeland. in search of refuge away from all the conflict. Protecting one's family at times of incredible duress becomes the most important goal. It's understandable why the Czechoslovak region saw multiple exoduses of people during the span of 72 years. The dissolution of the Austro-Hungarian Empire would come a few years after the end of World War I in 1920. Wow. And here I was thinking it dissolved in 1919 as a result of the Treaty of Versailles. But wow. And it was dissolved actually by the Treaty of Saint-Germain-en-Laye and that was signed by the Allies. The treaty effectively settled the blame of the Great War on the Central Powers. The newly formed Republic of Austria would be forced to recognise the newly independent states of Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Poland, and the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Serbs. Slovenes, Croats, and Serbs. And I think that's it for today's video, guys. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys all learned something from this, which was the main purpose of this video, to teach people about specifically the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Anyway, guys, hope you all enjoyed the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, guys.